So at some point along your filmmaking journey, you've probably heard someone tell you to shoot in a flat or a log profile. Well, in this video, I'm going to teach you what log footage is, why you should use it, and I'll also show you a few different methods that you can use to normalize your log footage, regardless of your editing software. All right, let's get started. Yo, my name is Xavier. I'm a freelance filmmaker and my goal is to help you learn how to make better videos. On this channel, I cover all things filmmaking, from the business side of things to the creative stuff. If you're into that sort of thing, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to receive notifications when I upload new content. Moving forward, so today we're going to be talking about how to convert your properly exposed log footage to the traditional Rec. 709 color space. Quick disclaimer, we will not be doing any sort of color grading / stylizing or white balance corrections. This video is simply explaining the 3 different ways to convert your footage. Now, before I actually get into the techniques, it's important that you understand what log footage is and why to shoot in this color profile. Log stands for logarithmic, and if you're familiar with high school math, then you've probably heard that term before, and you've probably seen one of these graphs. These graphs are mathematical representations of normal and log footage. Just like with the curves in Lightroom or Photoshop, the blackest blacks are down here in the lower left, and the brightest whites are up here in the upper right. You can see that the normal footage is just a straight line, while the logarithmic has a nice curve to it. Think of that curve in the log footage as all of the shadow and mid-tone detail being preserved in the image. Okay, so the biggest reason why we shoot in log is actually pretty simple. We want to maximize the dynamic range available to us in our camera sensor. Another great benefit is having a smoother highlight roll-off, so that way we can avoid that god-awful digital video look that you get from most cell phones and other point-and-shoot cameras. If you're just starting out and you're on a budget, you can't go wrong picking up either a Sony a6300 or a Panasonic GH4. They both have log profiles and they both shoot in 4K. Alright, so now that I've given you a crash course on what log footage is and what it does, let's take a look at the 3 ways to convert your log footage to a reusable Rec. 709 color space. The first 2 methods you can use on pretty much any program, whether that be Avid, Final Cut, Premiere Pro, or whatever you may be using, as long as it has a color suite. But I'll be using Davinci Resolve since this studio version came with my camera. I'll provide a link in the description below for a public version of Resolve. It's free, I've done tons of client work on it. It does have a few limitations, like you can't export in 4K, but it's worth learning. So the first technique is a manual grade. This one is pretty simple, but it can take some time to correct all of your footage. So what you want to do is create 2 layers. The first one is for contrast and the second one is for saturation. By the way, for my Resolve users, you can just hit Alt-S to make a new node. Before we move forward, make sure your scopes are open. You can find them in Resolve by hitting this little icon in the lower right. If you're using Premiere, they should be open in your color tab under the default layout. If you're not familiar with scopes, I'll be making a future video about the type of scopes there are, what they do, and how to use them. So if you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed so that you can stay updated on future posts. Alright, so now we're going to hop into our editor. Select your contrast layer and apply the contrast manually. You want to adjust the shadows by bringing them down until your scopes hit the 0 line. The next thing you want to do is adjust the highlights by dragging them up until the brightest part of your scopes are barely reaching the top line. So now we just want to go into our second layer and add some saturation. For the purposes of this video, I'll just be using the slider to achieve proper saturation. And to do that, I'll bring it all the way up to 100% and gradually lower it down until I reach a nice saturation balance. Alright, so now we're going to hop into our second method, which is the LUT method. If you thought that manually grading was a lot of work, you're absolutely right. Because when you manually grade, you have to adjust every clip individually, which can take a lot of time and it can also be pretty inaccurate. When I started my career as a filmmaker, I would sit there for hours just adding contrast and saturation, but I just knew there had to be a better way. Then I learned about lookup tables, also known as LUTs. These LUTs are, in a nutshell, a mathematical equation that you drop onto your footage to correct that logarithmic curve. However, it's not just as easy as just slapping one on your footage and calling it a day. There are actually 3 steps that you want to take in order to achieve the best results. So before I show you on the computer, I want to show you on a piece of paper and kind of like break down what the workflow looks like. So this box right here is where we're going to be putting our LUT. This is going to be the middle layer. The one before it is going to be our contrast tweaks to save our highlights, and then the final one is going to be for our color balance. So I'll just show you real quick what that looks like when you do it the proper way. You see how I can pull these highlights back and bring these shadows back up, nothing's clipped. However, when I do it the opposite way and just kind of plop the LUT on, all that highlight and shadow detail is clipped. Now, before I forget to mention, you can save this as a preset or you can download the free presets in the link in the description below. The presets are only for Premiere Pro guys because that's what I originally learned on. Moving forward, this last option is for Davinci Resolve users only. So if you guys want to hop on the bandwagon and learn about Davinci Resolve, I highly recommend that you stay for the rest of the video. Alright, color management. Just when I thought that my workflow speed improved, I started using Davinci Resolve. And man oh man, is this program a game changer. From the basic video editing to color correction and even audio editing, not to mention all the crazy features it has built into it. It has all the tools you need to edit your videos. So with the color management option, you're going to select this little settings gear in the lower right hand corner on the window. Go ahead and click the color management option and change the color settings to Davinci YRGB Color Manage. Change the input color space to whatever log profile you're using. In this case, I'm using Blackmagic Design's Pocket 4K Generation 4. Now, depending on what type of monitor you have, you want to change the timeline and output color space to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4 or 2.2. The Davinci Resolve user guide says to use the Gamma 2.4 option as a first option. However, since the Gamma 2.4 is a little flat on my monitor, I choose to go with the Gamma 2.2. So more often than not, my highlights always blow out when I input these settings, no matter what type of log footage I'm using. So what I do to change that is go to the timeline output tone mapping and set it to luminance mapping, and then set the max timeline luminance mapping to 400 nits. This method is great even when working with multiple variations of log. All you have to do when working with different log profiles is pretty simple. You just go ahead in your media tab, locate all source clips, just kind of hit Control-Alt and then right click and change the input color space. If you're using photos already converted in the Rec 709 color space or footage that's converted to the Rec 709 color space, you can do the same method and just hit the bypass option. Finally, just like with the LUT method, you still need to make some adjustments to your saturation and contrast. However, you probably only need about 2 nodes to correct the contrast and any white balance issues. That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, please consider hitting that like button and letting me know your thoughts about this episode in the comment section below. If you're interested in me making more videos like this, please consider joining the notification squad by hitting the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.